everyone, and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show, brought to you by Over the Bar, with your hosts, as always, myself, Rory Petre, and Mark in Nuremberg. Welcome to a special edition of the Bundesliga Show. We are doing a joint show with our friends at the 2.Bundesliga podcasts. So this episode will be concentrating basically on the race for promotion in one of the most hotly contested title races in probably in the entire world at the moment, which is in the 2.Bundesliga. So we're very fortunate to be joined by Matthew and Ava from the 2.Bundesliga podcasts. So we'll just quickly give you a little bit of an oversight into what exactly Matthew and Ava do. So they very similarly to myself and Mark, although this is in podcast form, do a weekly podcast that covers all things 2.Bundesliga in English for those of you who are fans of the league. So covering everything on a weekly basis. So obviously you can check that out on Anchor. So just go search it in Anchor and you'll be able to subscribe to it. And so you won't be able to miss a show in the future. Also, before we bring him in, Matthew does have a new podcast himself that he's working on called One and One. That's also available on all good audio platforms, Spotify especially. So yeah, without further ado, that is, let's bring them both in, Matthew and Ava, and here they are.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you both? How's it going?
Good so far. Thanks. Tired, yeah. Annoyed by the whole COVID situation in Germany, obviously, but otherwise.
Before we get into it all, and before we talk actual football, we're covering 3 countries and we're covering a lot of ground as well, because we've got myself in England, Ava and Mark in Germany, and Matthew has very kindly got up at the crack of dawn to join us from Australia. So fair play to you both. Brilliant to have you on the show. We're very excited to get stuck into it, really, because this obviously has effects on both the leagues that we cover. So without further ado, we'll kind of get kind of stuck into the nitty-gritty of the title race that is currently going on in the 2.Bundesliga. And as recording this present time on the 31st of March, we're recording, it's Bochum who lead the way in first place. So I'll just kind of go over to yourself, Matthew and Ava, on the kind of the different teams in the top 4 as it stands, and just quickly give us a bit of a review of how both their season so far. So if I just throw it over to you, Matthew, and what you thought of Bochum so far this season, how they've got on.
Well, they've been very impressive, and it's a company of the entire unit that has really made it work. Considering last season they were a bit up and down with just overall form, players not really gelling together. I mean, there was a lot of talk about Amel Bella-Kotchap after his performance against Bayern in the Cup the previous year, and this year they're just a much better side, well-rounded. They've got great options up top with Simon Zoller, their top scorer, with 12 goals. But the emergence of Robin Jewell, who played a pivotal part in Union Berlin's promotion, he came to Bochum midway through last season, was a little bit slow out of the gate, but this season, he's been arguably the best player in the Zweite Bundesliga. His ability to create in midfield, he's been able to hit the score sheet as well. And really those two in particular, Zoller and Robert Jewell, have been the catalyst of Bochum's rise, and they're in a very, very good position where, for the first time, and I think don't quote me on this, probably about 13 years since they last were in not even 13 years, but I think it's 10 since they were last in the Bundesliga. They're in really good shape with the final 8 games to go.
Yeah, and obviously in second place we got the big boys, along with FC Nuremberg. We've got Hamburg SV, obviously in second place in the Zweite Bundesliga at the moment. So over to you, Ava. I mean, obviously they're a massive club. I mean, I consider them to be one of the kind of big 4 or 5 clubs in Germany. It's been a disaster for them to spend now this is a 3rd season in the second tier of German football. What have you made of them so far this season?
Well, in the beginning, I really liked the appointment of Daniel Thune as a new head manager. Was very impressed by his work at VfL Osnabrück, as was the HSV, apparently. I do think, as for now, they do play their best Zweite Bundesliga season. I like the way they play. They do show a lot of beautiful game of football from time to time, especially on the likes of Kitte, but also Leibold, and of course up front Simon Terodde. He has been pivotal appointment at the beginning of the season. As an Arminia Bielefeld fan, I'm very happy he's not playing in the same league as he does, because usually he scores at least like 3 or 4 goals a season against us. So Matt and I were both very glad to see him back in the Zweite Bundesliga, because he's a typical Zweite Bundesliga striker. Usually not that successful when he goes up to the Bundesliga. You've seen that with FC Köln, but he's really good at HSV, vital factor. But you have a couple of really outstanding players in the midst, and well, they struggle. They always have those 5 or 6 games which they struggle in 5 or 6 consecutive games. As for now, they seem to fall back with a win, for example, against Bochum, but also against Heidenheim. Very, very important with Bochum picking up points as well. And just to bring a bit of points between them and clubs like Fürth or Heidenheim and so on and so on. So that was very important for them in the last 2 weeks. I do like what Daniel Thune has made out of this team, and I know that a lot of fans do too. They really do like this Thune HSV. You don't really know if they're going to end up in this last 3 places in the end, because we've seen that the last couple of seasons they do manage to ball it at the end.
Yeah. I remember Sandhausen last year. That was one of the kind of all-time failures. I have a few friends who are Hamburg fans, and I was really, really giving them a lot of stick over that one. I mean, that was a real disaster, wasn't it? Losing 5-1 at home to Sandhausen when they just need a point to get promoted or something, or it was a disaster.
Because actually everyone was hoping for Bielefeld to win against Heidenheim, but because it was the last game of the season, everyone's like, okay, Bielefeld's not going to bother about this. But Bielefeld actually won against Heidenheim, but then HSV lost, so that was the last chance to that 3rd place.
Yeah, good stuff. Moving on to 3rd place then, as it stands, who are just 4 points off 1st place Bochum, so it's still incredibly congested, is 3rd. So Matthew, just a few words on how they've got on this season.
Well, they've been a bit of a surprise. I had them in the bottom half of the table. They're a bit of a difficult side to judge. Typically, season to season, they're a bit yo-yoing between the precipice of being in the top 5 or 6 to kind of that mid-table mediocrity that no one really wants to be in. But, when you have a list of players, a good number of them who are out of contract and that all have something to prove, you get a situation like what Fürth have this season, where they've played some incredibly good football under Stefan Leitl in I think it's his 2nd full season at the club. The likes of Branimir Hagurta, Harvard Nielsen, Sebastian Ernst have all been fantastic. You look at Sascha Boykert, who's been a solid goalkeeper in the Zweite Bundesliga for many, many years. And what you have is a team that is very good when they go forward. They've got, as mentioned before, just a ton of good attacking options. And, they are very much in the fight. Whether they can sustain this, the question, as was proven in their result on the weekend, where they really got bailed out at the end by a Dixon Abiyama header. It may seem unlikely. They may be the team that drops out, but so far, they've had a very impressive season. And, there may be a few teams looking for a manager who may see what Stefan Leitl's done there and think he might be the next guy for them.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm still having nightmares over that last minute third goal against Nuremberg. I thought it was finally, since I've been in Germany, Nuremberg, they haven't beaten Fürth at all in 5 or 6 attempts. And I finally thought they were going to do it, you know. But no, it wasn't to be, and they got the equaliser right at the end. But I hope they don't go up anyway. Yeah. Sorry, Fürth fans, but you know. Yeah. Okay, so on to the 4th place team. Obviously, the side that are just outside that kind of that automatic spot at the moment, out of the playoff spot, I should say, is Holstein Kiel. I mean, obviously, they do have 2 games in hand, so it's worth bearing that in mind. But for me, they've been really impressive. So I just wanted to hear what you wanted to say, Ava, because I didn't have them as having a chance of promotion this year, but they've done really well.
Well, the thing is, what does help them is that for once they didn't lose their manager at the beginning of the season, which has been quite popular for them, with Markus Anfang going to FC Köln, Tim Walter going to VfB Stuttgart. Ole Werner is actually staying. They had another coach at the beginning of the season, which no one was really impressed about, with Markus Schubert. Everyone said, well, that doesn't make sense at all. They really opted up their game. I mean, the biggest win they had this season was obviously the win against Bayern Munich in the DFB Pokal, which was a huge advertisement for the Zweite Liga in a way. I do really like them, especially people like Yanni Lucas Serra, who's of course going to Bielefeld for the new season, but of course Lee, who is just a wonderful player to watch. I know that a couple of clubs also from the Bundesliga are really watching out for him because he's just a brilliant player. I do think he is out for more. They have a very good goalkeeper for this season in Janis Gelios, who has been under criticism, especially last season, but he's done a brilliant job so far. In general, it's a very well put together team, I do believe. And I do like that mixture of teams that are in the top 4 at the moment. Very difficult to predict who's going to be where at the end of the season, but for sure we can say it's going to be a tough fight and a very close fight as well.
Yeah, and that leads me nicely into the next question that I wanted to ask you guys, because obviously we talked about the main 4. They have been the top 4, I think, for the whole season really this year. And I just wanted to ask, do you think there are any other sides that could possibly get into the mix? Because I remember before the season, I really thought that Heidenheim had a great chance of promotion this year. But for me, they've disappointed. So what do you guys think? Any suggestions on that any other teams that could get involved in that top 4 race?
So my problem is I had Fortuna Düsseldorf top of the league. Well, that hasn't been going great so far. I do want Uwe Rösler's optimism. I do, because even after 0-0 draw against SV Sandhausen, he was like, we still have chances for the promotion. I was like, yeah, you don't. Yeah. So they're probably the team that disappointed me most in that race for promotion, similar to Hannover 96, of course. Don't know about you, Matthew, but about Heidenheim, it's kind of the core, really curse of the relegation side. They always struggle the season after.
They do, but I think for them to get back to 5th where they are currently is still a pretty good achievement when you consider their 2 best players both left at the start of the season. Now, Tim Kleinitz did return on loan during the winter transfer, and he's been pretty good. I think he's got 6 goals already in a short span of time. But yeah, it is always tough when teams make the playoffs, and as we've seen how rare it is, I think only 3 teams since 2008 have managed to go up through the playoff, and I think Nuremberg was the first, Union Berlin, and clearly I've had a bit of a brain fart because I've forgotten who the other team was. But But yeah, I think for them to go fifth, considering that they have one of the smallest budgets in the league, I think it's a pretty good accomplishment, and it also speaks a lot to the way Frank Schmidt goes about things as a manager to get them into a position where they're only 4 points off Kiel. So with 8 matches to go, they still have a chance, but it's unlikely that the top 4 will be deserved.
Good stuff. And so that's a good little overview of obviously the kind of main teams that are in the mix to get promoted into the Bundesliga for next season. So in order to obviously kind of display a bit more about the league and try to get more of an idea of the league itself for everyone that's watching, if they don't know the 2.Bundesliga as well, a question to you both really about how hard exactly is it to get out of this league in order to be promoted to the Bundesliga. Obviously, we've already, as a kind of case study, we've already kind of mentioned the Hamburg situation. So obviously I pose it to either one of you, maybe kind of just to chat us through a little bit about how competitive that division really is.
Well, so I can say it from a point of view as a Bielefeld fan, for example. I mean, that last season was crazy, going up with like 10 points difference to VfB Stuttgart, obviously. But that's what we see at the league for now as well. So most of the time, it's a team that has stability in the team, in the club in general, which we have at Bochum at the moment as well. They have been in the 2.Bundesliga for quite some time. They have a very good team just from the inside out. So you have the feeling that they work together very well. You didn't have that feeling at Hamburg, for example. You had the same with Union. They didn't go up directly, but that had a bit to do with the teams they were going up against, obviously. That's why it's very difficult to actually predict why teams don't go up. I mean, we've seen Nuremberg, they struggle. We've seen Hannover. They do have the financials, for example, to really build a squad that can do it, but that's most of the time it's not the main character you need. Bielefeld being an example, Bochum being an example this season. So yeah, for me, it's mainly that you really need a good structure, that you need someone that understands the league, that you have a good mixture of experienced players, young players, and then you can do it. But you also need the other teams to screw it up from time to time, basically. That's how I would describe it. But I don't know how you see it, Matthew.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily hard. I think out of all the leagues, you'd probably compare, it's very comparable to the Championship in England, is that teams who go down don't automatically find their way back to the top unless you're Norwich, who just yo-yo their way between the two divisions. So I think the biggest mistake a lot of teams make is that assumption that they go down and, well, we've got the individual quality if it stays. We've got the finances to bring in the best players from the 2.Bundesliga. It'll be a cakewalk. We'll walk straight through it. But as Hamburg have seen the last 3 years, it's anything but a cakewalk. And when you don't have that sort of stability or a manager that you fully trust, what happens is you get what Hamburg have had the last 3 years. You get what Nuremberg are going through the last couple of years where, Nuremberg were 30 seconds away from being a Drittliga side last season, or Hamburg at the sorry to mention it, but at the end of the last 2 campaigns for Hamburg, they fell at the final hurdle. You can remember the Hannes Wolf situation, who's now the manager of Leverkusen, where he came in, they beat St. Pauli in the derby, and then they completely fell off a cliff, and they only won one game, and that was match day 34 against Duisburg, who were already relegated. So, it speaks volumes to how difficult it is, and that teams that you don't expect immediately to go up because, they might not have the finances or the individual quality, but because they're an all well-rounded team with a manager who understands what is required in the league, those teams find their way up, and likes of Hanover and Fortuna are finding this year, they haven't been able to have things their own way.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us nicely into FC Nuremberg now. So obviously, as a Nuremberg fan, I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you a few questions about their club, as they're known as. I mean, it's been 2 disastrous years, actually 3 disastrous years as for the club. You know, I mean, I've been a fan for about 4 years of the club. No, about 3 years, and actually in the first half year they got promoted to the Bundesliga. So I mean, that was just an amazing time. I thought it's great being a Nuremberg fan, you know, at that time. But then obviously since then we had that disastrous year in the Bundesliga where we only won 3 games, you know. So then I started to realize how tough it was. And then, I mean, last year was just a complete and utter disaster, you know. But I just wanted to know what you guys kind of make of what's going on at Nuremberg, because obviously the fans here in the city are not happy at all, you know. They're not happy with the club. They just can't understand what's going wrong. So I'll start with you, Ava. What is going wrong at Nuremberg?
Well, I do think you can compare it a bit to the whole Kaiserslautern situation, for example, or 8060 as well. So you have a club with a huge traditional fan base, a huge traditional club as well. But at some stage, something went really, really wrong. And as soon as they got promoted, they thought, okay, we kind of like went to rehab, we're back now, and kind of forgot about how difficult it is to be a promoted side in the Bundesliga, which we've seen like forever now. And then, yeah, you had the feeling that the club officials had very wrong thoughts about how this Zweite Liga is going to be, which I do find a bit irritating because they just came from there. So it's not like, I don't know, HSV who've never been in the Zweite Bundesliga before, or I don't know, maybe even Schalke if they're going down, or Hertha. So sorry, Matthew. It's different from there, but they actually know how the Zweite Liga works. So I was a bit surprised. And when they went down, you had a couple of players that just really disappointed a lot of people, like of Nikola Dovedan. I mean, fans from the Zweite Bundesliga did expect a lot more of him. I mean, they this season they're very unlucky with the injury of Robin Hack, for example. I do think Manuel Schäffler isn't working the way they've expected him to be. So they need players like, young players to step up. I did really like the signing of Mats Möller-Deli on loan. I do think you can already see what impact he can have on the team, because he's like just really bringing some creativity. And also goalkeeping. I'm still not sure Christian Mantegna is the right choice for goalkeeper. Does make a lot of mistakes. Don't want to, I don't know, butcher him or anything, but at this stage we have a number of good goalkeepers, and I'm quite sure Nuremberg has still the reputation in German football to get a better goalkeeper than Christian Mantegna.
Yeah, I remember there was one game. I was actually at the game in the Bundesliga, and they played against Borussia Dortmund, and I think he made about 12 or 13 saves in that game. And after that game, he was seen as like a god amongst the Nuremberg fans. But I don't think he's had a good game since then, to be honest with you. You know, like he's made a lot of mistakes and has been disastrous since. Yeah. And Matthew, I just want to ask you, obviously with Klaus coming in from as a coach from RB Leipzig, there was a lot of kind of hope that the club were going to start developing a lot of young players. I mean, have any of the young players at the club caught your eye? Obviously, I mean, Fabian Nürnberg, Handwerk, like those players are quite highly rated amongst the fans, but who's impressed you?
I think Nürnberger has to be the one. I mean, it's such a weird one because he's played in so many different positions already. You know, you've seen him at left back, we've seen him at left mid, he's played centre mid. You know, that lack of continuity is not, I mean, it's good for a player to have such a diverse range of, you know, flexibility tactically. But the problem with that being is that he doesn't really have a defined role. He's more of a, you know, a plug-in player. I was interested to see how Shuranov was going to go. And maybe he's their striker of the future. I mean, he was very impressive in the derby on the weekend. I thought, his movement off the ball, and you watch the goal that he scored, and a lot of that was created from his off the ball movement, really lulling the defense into opening the space up. And I mean, there's a saying in Australia. I mean, he had the length of the Flemington Straight to work with, and then he coolly finished past Sasha Boygat. So I think Shuranov is the one for me that can really make an impact. And I know that there have been some Nuremberg fans calling for him to start over Nikola Dovedan. And I think really, as we've seen in the few games he's appeared, the warrant for him to get in the starting 11 has been justified.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. So just a couple more quick questions then on regards to the title race. We'll just quickly flip back to it, and then what we always love to do is we'd love to put our guests on the spot. So we'll do a few predictions as well with regards to who's going up. We'll go around the table in a little while. But first, just one question I'll quickly fire at you, Matthew. Then I'll go to Ava on a slightly different one. With regards to, regardless of who goes up, if we count these top four as obviously the main teams in the title race, how well equipped would you say that any of the four are to survive in the Bundesliga? Do they have a good setup, as we've mentioned with Bochum, or could it be a disaster season for any one of those four teams if they were to go up?
I think the tough question about it is that you look at a team like Bochum who have showed stability throughout the season, but it's exactly what Bielefeld had last season, and we saw them go up. And I guess the problem is once they go up, they're still crippled by the finances or the lack thereof in comparison to the rest of the teams in the Bundesliga. So it's really difficult because there's a lot of sink or swim. You look at Stuttgart this season who, have far more financial capabilities than Arminia, Bielefeld, and they've been able to make it work. And unfortunately for Bielefeld, why they were a much better divided Bundesliga side throughout last season, it has been very difficult to bring in players to strengthen the squad. A number of their signings just haven't worked at all. And you have a situation where they're fighting the drop. And I think if Bochum were to go up, they would probably face the same. I think Hamburg would, for mine anyway, would be in that similar bottom five if they were to get promoted. I don't really think there is a team at the moment that is well equipped to make a run at survival if they were to get promoted. I think it's really tight either way. There'd have to be some, I think you're going to have the usual suspects like Bremen, Augsburg, who are just going to be there. Maybe Union Berlin next season as well. There'll be a number of teams in that Bundesliga that will be in the mix for those relegation places. But I would suggest that the 2 or 3 Zweite Bundesliga clubs that go up will find it difficult.
Very good. That again perfectly leads us on to the next question, actually, and I'll throw it over to Ava. And we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier with regards to the actual playoff match itself and the lack of success that Zweite Bundesliga teams have had in this particular playoff match. So obviously, it was the 2-legged affair where the winner over aggregate will either be promoted or will be saved in the case of the Bundesliga side. So, Ava, again, similar question to what I just asked Matthew. What do you think the chances are of us seeing a Zweite Bundesliga side win the playoff place or match this season, again, with regards to whoever it may be in that third spot?
Difficult question, because the last 2 years the winner was the team that has scored more away goals, because we didn't actually have winners in both legs, neither in Stuttgart versus Union than in Bremen against Heidenheim. So first of all, that's a stupid rule. just say that here. I do find it kind of difficult because, if you take HSV, for example, they have relegation experience, but always from the other side, obviously. I do think that a team like Kiel could do it, like a really, really big could, because they have been struggling after they played in the relegation before. In that playoff game, I do find it kind of difficult because it always depends on who is the Bundesliga side. If it's, for example, going to be Mainz or Arminia Bielefeld, huge different than, for example, Hertha BSC. Just a huge difference, just team-wise. I mean, just compare teams like Hertha BSC to Kiel, to Fürth. That's just from individual quality.
Yeah.
Just a huge gap. And although they don't put it on the pitch or bring it on the pitch every week, you can see it from time to time. And if you don't, you just know that in those playoff games. I mean, Nuremberg knows if you don't bring it on the pitch all the time, or asking Ingolstadt against Wien Wiesbaden. I mean, if you're not there just for a couple of seconds, you can lose it. No matter, I mean, I know that from being a Bielefeld fan again. Greetings going out to Darmstadt 98. It's really about putting up to good enough matches. It's not enough to only have one good match. And so I do find it difficult because we have a couple of good teams in the 2. Bundesliga, but it's really dependent on who is going to be the side they play against. And I would always say, okay, if it's that team, then I would say that team has the best chances. For me, very difficult to actually predict.
Yeah, very much so. I think you're exactly right in the fact that it will be very different depending on which teams are in that particular playoff place. But we don't have a clue because obviously the title race and the relegation race in each respective league is very much on. And speaking of which, so we love, as I mentioned, to put people on the spot where on the show, whether it's where their team will finish or what might happen in a title race. So we'll just go around. I'll start off and then we'll go to Ava, Matthew and Mark, and we'll say who we think will come in the top 3. So I'll kick us off and I'll say that Hamburg will end up as league winners and be joined by Bochum in 2nd place. And I reckon Kiel will grab that playoff place in 3rd place, so meaning Fürth will miss out. So over to Ava, what do you reckon?
I do think Bochum will hold on, just from not having that much pressure as HSV. Do you think HSV will go up this year as 2nd? 3rd place, very difficult for me, but I think similar to you, it's going to be Kiel.
Matthew?
Yeah, I've got the same as Eva. I think, Bochum very reminiscent of what Bielefeld did last season, although Bielefeld, absolutely smashed the league. So yeah, I think Bochum, have a more well-rounded 2. Bundesliga side. But of course, Hamburg have Simon Terodde. So I mean, he hasn't scored for a while. So I mean, they might want to get him going as well. But I think it'll be them and then Kiel for the first time since they played Wolfsburg a few years ago. I think they'll be in the playoffs.
Stuff, Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to go I agree with you guys at Bochum. I think they're the best side in the league this year. I do think they'll be the champions. And I'm actually going to go for Holstein Kiel as 2nd spot. I think we're going to have another bottle job from Hamburg this year. But I do think Hamburg will get 3rd place. And I think I'm going to go for a famous Bielefeld versus Hamburg relegation playoff match.
Heard it here first.
Bielefeld to win in the last minute,
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, we'll have to look back at this and see who got it right and who didn't. So briefly moving on then, onto a slightly different subject. We're still talking, of course, 2. Bundesliga. I'm going to ask, obviously, Matthew and Ava yourself, just a question with regards to some players to look out for. So I'll throw the question over to Ava first, and maybe just to pick out 1 or 2 players that we in the Bundesliga might well be seeing next season, whether they come up promoted with their side or whether so maybe one player to pick out from a team that looks like they might get promoted, and then maybe someone from outside of that top 4 that is maybe attracting interest from elsewhere. So do you want to just maybe touch on a few players, Ava, that have caught the eye and that we might see in the Bundesliga next season?
Well, I mean, Matthew mentioned him before, but for me, it's definitely Robert Jewell. He's a fantastic player. He is one of the cores of Bochum. You can see it in games where the opponents manage to take him out. That Bochum isn't really able to do anything. Just rewatch the game against Aue, for example, where Aue really managed to take Jewell out of the game, don't really let him getting the ball. Then Bochum is kind of lost up front. I mean, he has been at Hoffenheim, for example. We know that he can be Bundesliga quality, whether it's going to be with Bochum or with any other Bundesliga side. I do think that, especially in the mix of teams like Augsburg, for example, but also Union Berlin, they're going to look out for players like him because he definitely does have the quality around teams that not potentially going up. I mean, it's hard to look past Robin Hack, of course. Mm-hmm. I mean, he has been a very good player. He wanted to leave the club at some stage, stayed at Nuremberg. But just I mean, you don't have a lot of players playing in the lower side of the 2. Bundesliga that are being picked for the national team, or even if it's the U21 national team. So I do think that he will be a player to look out for. He might make the change to Bundesliga side to go on loan again. We've seen that a couple of times in the Bundesliga, but yeah, I do think if his injury will at least at some stage let him go, I do think we'll see him at the Bundesliga at some stage. Yeah.
Good stuff. Matthew, yeah, same question. Any other players to have a look out for next season?
Well, for me, I think the obvious one is Lee Jae-sung, the South Korean international at Holstein Kiel. Really had 3 fantastic seasons with Kiel out of contract he wants to leave anyway. He wants the opportunity to play in the Bundesliga. There was a period where I thought it was going to be Hoffenheim, which would have been bitterly disappointing to see him go to there. I think it just would be disappointing, I think. But he's got great individual quality on the ball. He can play a number of positions. We've seen him play as a false 9 when Andre Schubert was in charge. Same with Tim Walters, used him there. Less so under Oli Werner. Brings a lot to the table. He mightn't have the goals to his name as he has in previous seasons. But what teams would be getting in the Bundesliga is someone who can be a real plus on the offensive end. And I think he's someone a number of Bundesliga teams will be looking at. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I think if Kiel were to go up, that may keep him there. But if they don't, he's definitely on the move. A player who isn't, on a team that is promoted who could be one to watch out for, I'd say Erzgebirge Auer's Florian Kruger. I mean, he was a Schalke Academy player, been at Auer for a couple of years now, has 11 goals this season, playing under Dirk Schuster, which is quite an accomplishment considering, his typical brand of football is quite defensive. He's recently been with the U21 squad. He's very, very impressive. He's quick, very decisive. He has great movements off the ball. And as he's shown this season, he's very deadly in front of goals. So, I mean, that's I think he would be a lower Bundesliga side would certainly be taking note of the impact he's been having at Auer the last couple of seasons.
Good stuff. Very interesting. So our final little segment on this special episode is now going to be actually focusing on the Bundesliga sides that are involved in a relegation race that may well find themselves in the 2. Bundesliga next season. And almost like we've planned it, Matthew and Ava happen to have a bit of a vested interest in this because Matthew is a Schalke fan and Ava is an Arminia Bielefeld fan. So I think it's quite safe that we can go over to Matthew and we'll just get your thoughts on how with the rather inevitable-looking impending relegation that's going to happen at the club, how well equipped would you say that your club are going to be with regards to next season in Bundesliga?
Not really. I don't really. I think the probably the interesting thing with Schalke is who's even going to be in the squad next season. Because I'm expecting massive yard sale type situation where a bunch of players are going to be on the move, young players who have any sort of financial value to equip the club with the financial loss it's had over the past few seasons. The talk of the debt of over 200 million euros. The team has to come up with the money somehow. So I think you look at, say, Matthew Hoppe, who infamously scored that hat-trick against Hoffenheim. God bless the man. I mean, he's probably someone who has a lot of value, and there's going to be a team out there that would be willing to shell out on his potential. So, you see Weston McKennie's is going to be staying at Juventus. We're going to get the money for that. But ultimately, it really depends on who's there come the start of the season. There are probably a number of players that I'd hope that Schalke would make a run out that are in the Zweite Bundesliga. The likes of Genki Haraguchi, who's going to be on a free, as it doesn't look like Hanover have offered him a deal that will want him, that will keep him at the club. Florian Kruger would be another one to bring back. They've already signed Danny Latzer, current captain of Mainz. And, it's a really weird situation where there is so much uncertainty with what the team will look like. I don't expect the first season to be a particularly kind one for Schalke. It'll be one of learning. Will Demetrius Gramotzes even be there? I mean, it's not really his fault that he's been catapulted into a situation where the team is an absolute dumpster fire and he's expected to somehow come out with some sort of miracle. I mean, you could put Pep Guardiola in that Schalke team as a manager, give him Lionel Messi, and they're still not winning games. It's just not possible. So, ultimately, I think, as it stands at the moment, no, I think they're in danger of being a mid-tier side in the Zweite Bundesliga, and that's the facts. It just it's going to it'll take realistically it will take a couple of years for it to get going. But what you don't want to happen is for it to become like Hamburg, and it take 2 or 3 3 to 4 years, and you're like, I'm not entirely sure this is going to happen anymore, and we're just going to be a Zweite Bundesliga side and then peter out. So a lot needs to happen. They announced Peter Knabel as the sports and communication manager today, which was a very vanilla signing. Just as long as he's not allowed to take any sort of documentation outside of Veltons Arena, we'll be okay.
And then, going over to Ava, slightly more optimistic outlook then on your side, Ava. There's obviously been a bit of a resurgence that we've seen from Mainz. Ultimately, me and Mark almost wrote Mainz off about a month or two ago, actually, because their form was quite poor, and they've obviously charged up the league, and now we've got a 4 or 5 team kind of fight now for those remaining 2 spots. So how do you feel about your side in terms of their chances to stay up? And then if they were to go down, how do you think they'd recover?
Yeah, interesting question concerning especially the upcoming match day, because there will be the match between Mainz and Bielefeld. So massive game for both sides, especially for Bielefeld, who have been, as we say in Germany, above the line after the win against Leverkusen, and then they lost against Leipzig, and it didn't look that bad because they played Friday night, but from each game you went on, it got really, really horrible. I mean, it looked like every opponent was playing against them. Mainz won against Hoffenheim, Hertha won against Leverkusen, obviously. So they ended up in 17th place. So that doesn't look very good. So they obviously need a win on the weekend. I mean, what we've seen throughout the season, that Bielefeld is actually quite good, or manages to pick up points against teams that are in this low mix, except Köln for the 3-1 defeat. So they have good chances, but they do really need to win it. I think it's going to be like really point like where the rest of the season is going, because the interesting thing is that Mainz has a couple of tougher opponents to play until the end of the season compared to Bielefeld, who play teams like Augsburg, Freiburg, basically Schalke, but as well as Hertha and Hoffenheim. So all teams that are lower in the league. I mean, we played all of the top teams until now. So just table-wise, it seems to be a bit easier from Bielefeld from now on, although we've seen Mainz picking up points against sides like RB Leipzig, but also not playing a really bad game against Bayern Munich, at least for the first 45 minutes. So it's really, really tough. I have to say, I do like what Bo Svensson did with that Mainz from side. You can really see that he really fun at playing return to their team. I mean, Achim Bayerlotzer really destroyed that at some stage. You could see that especially Lichter as well as when Svensson rebuilt that. And Mainz has his experience. That's the thing. Mainz has much more experience playing that position in the Bundesliga than Bielefeld has. I mean, it has been 11 years since we've been the side in the Bundesliga. Most of the time, our concerns were more about if we're going to stay in the Zweite Liga and not going down to the Dritte Liga again. So we do have experience in relegation. That's not it, but not in the Bundesliga, and especially with not having fans. I know that sounds always like a very easy excuse, but especially for a team like Bielefeld, fans do play huge, huge impact. We've seen that before, and that's just personally, of course, very, very sad not being able to, celebrate the promotion with them, but of course, getting them through this whole Bundesliga year, it would have made a difference from time to time. And of course, money is a problem here as well. We have been struggling before. We do struggle now again because nobody really expected empty stadiums for so long. I think the general advice was planning 50% without home fans. Yeah, obviously that's not going to happen until the end of the season. So yeah, it's very difficult at this stage. I'm just going to be happy if we don't get relegated as Paderborn, for example, last season. Like, just always playing well, and at the end of the game, coaches always think, well, they do play good football, but they went down anyway. So very tough. We do rely on other teams screwing it up as well, basically.
Okay, so just before we finish, let's close on some predictions for the Bundesliga relegation fight. So I think I will start. Okay, so let's start with the bottom two, and then the third from bottom relegation playoff place as well. So I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Matthew, but I've got to say Schalke are going to go down. I'm going to say FC Cologne as well. I think Köln will go down this year. And then I'm going to say for the third bottom in the relegation spot, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Ava, but Bielefeld. But I am going to predict that Bielefeld will win the playoff. I've just got a feeling for you guys, So over to Matthew. What do you think?
Well, we're basically already in mid-table in the Zweite Bundesliga. So, I mean, at this stage, we could just put the cue in the rack and call it a season and start preparing for next season. So, yeah, we'll be bottom. Schalke will be bottom. And then I agree. I think Köln are just terrible. They are really bad under Marcus Gisdol, and I'm amazed they haven't ripped the Band-Aid yet, where so many teams around them have done so. Hertha have done it. Bielefeld did it. Mainz did it, but Köln, for whatever reason, have stuck with Gisdol, and I think every other team around them, minus, of course, Schalke, who are well and truly out of the race, are just grateful that Köln have stuck with Gisdol. So I think Köln are on a one-way ticket back to the Zweite Bundesliga. I would love to see Hertha in the relegation playoff spot, because they're not the number one. They're not the big city club they claim to be. That's obviously Tasmania. So just in case anyone has forgotten. But I think realistically, it's probably going to be Bielefeld.
Yeah, and Ava.
Yeah, so Schalke, obviously. Sorry, not even playing Nostradamus here. But yeah, glad you're also optimistic. I will love to be as optimistic as you, but actually going to think Bielefeld is going to be 17th. We're going to see Köln picking up the relegation spot. Don't know why. Don't ask me why. I just have the feeling. Do you think Mainz will stay in the league, similar to Hertha? There will be some kind of, I don't know, Hahohe vibes at some stage. I don't know, the ghost of Jürgen Klinsmann returns in some way. I don't know, just have this feeling they're going to stay up. We will see. We will be a bit smarter in a couple of weeks. But yeah, that's at this point, that's my prediction.
Yeah, and Rory, finally.
Right. Well, as much as I don't always like to agree with my co-host, I must admit Mark's predictions are talking to me a little bit. So yeah, Schalke, and I think I think it'll be Köln, and then in that third playoff place, Arminia, I think. And yeah, I think that Arminia certainly. It will be close because I do like the looks of Bielefeld's last run of fixtures. They have been going through a very tough run of fixtures. Me and Mark have touched on that loads, actually. So it will be close, but I do think Mainz will just scrape out of it. But yeah, Bielefeld to win the playoff, of course.
Okay, so that pretty much brings to an end our Zweite Bundesliga special. So just as usual, I'm just going to close by saying, remember guys, to our regular viewers, to check out our Twitter account at @OverTheBarFB, so you can see anything football related on there. We also do a League One show, which I also take part in, so you've got to watch that as well. And also, Rory writes a lot of articles about the Bundesliga. Yeah, anything football related. And also remember to check out our main website, which is otbfootball.net, which is like the kind of centerpiece of our work. Okay, so thank you very, very much to Matthew and Ava. You were fantastic guests. It's been a pleasure to discuss the Zweite Bundesliga with you.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Appreciate it.